Good day, listeners. You're listening to Boto Ko, Boto Mo, Your Choice Matters, the radio program that empowers young voters to make informed choices in the upcoming elections. I'm your host, Maria Gerald, and today we're diving into the historical significance of voting and how understanding our past can guide us to make better decisions for the future. Joining us today is a special guest, Professor Christopher C. Riblenka, a history instructor of Northwestern Mindanao State College of Science and Technology, and a passionate advocate for civic education. Together, we'll explore how the lessons of history can inspire young voters to make their voices heard. So stay tuned, it's going to be an enlightening discussion. Voting is more than just marking a ballot. It's about shaping the future. The right to vote is a cornerstone of democracy and a powerful tool for change. But how often do we think about the struggles and sacrifices that gave us this right? For example, did you know that the People Power Revolution of 1986 wasn't just about protests? It was also a powerful call for free and fair elections. It was a reminder that voting is a collective act that can restore democracy and pave the way for meaningful progress. Today, many young voters in the Philippines face challenges such as misinformation and a lack of awareness about their rights. That's why voter education is so critical. Programs like this help bridge the gap, empowering young voters to understand their responsibilities and make informed choices. So to delve deeper into this topic, I'm honored to welcome our guest, Professor Christopher C. Riblenka, a history instructor known for his insightful lectures on democracy and civic engagement. Welcome to the program, Professor Chris.
Thank you, Mix Maria. It's a pleasure to be here and share the importance of voting from a historical perspective.
Thank you so much for that one, Professor Chris. So, Professor, here's my first question for this episode. So let's start with a fundamental question, all right? So why is voting such a crucial part of democracy?
For me, voting is the foundation of democracy because it gives power to the people. Throughout history, we've seen that societies thrive when citizens actively participate in decision-making. For instance, the suffrage movement worldwide highlighted the demand for equal representation. Here in the Philippines, the 1986 elections were a pivotal moment, showing how collective action through voting can topple regimes and restore democratic governance.
Wow, that's very insightful, Professor Chris, that you have mentioned about the 1986 elections and the movement, the suffrage movement as well worldwide, calling for equal representation. So with this, I would like to add on the question. So from a historical perspective, Professor Chris, what are some key lessons young voters can take as they prepare for the upcoming elections?
One key lesson is that every vote matters. History is filled with examples where elections were decided by a small margin, underscoring the power of individual votes. Another important lesson is to avoid being swayed by populism. Leaders with empty promises but no solid track record often lead to long-term struggles. Young voters should focus on candidates' platforms, their values, and their ability to address pressing issues like what we're facing now in education, employment, and sustainability.
Thank you so much for that one, Professor Chris. That was so knowledgeable coming from a professor like you. So you mentioned earlier that there are a lot of leaders actually with empty promises but no solid track record. So as a voter as well, myself, Professor Chris, I must agree with that we should always vote for the leaders who are actually qualified for the position. So given that point, given those Or that's such an important point coming from you, Professor. So, Professor Chris, what role does history play in combating misinformation, which is so prevalent during elections?
You know what, Mix Maria? History is very important because it provides context. By studying past elections, voters can identify patterns of propaganda, fake news, and other tactics used to mislead people. For instance, during past elections in the Philippines, misinformation was used to discredit candidates and manipulate voters. Understanding these tactics helps young voters critically evaluate information and recognize credible sources.
Wow, so that's quick question, Professor Chris, regarding about selecting credible sources. Any tips coming from you?
In selecting credible source, we need to know if this source coming from a reputable source like a news outlet and the like, if these people spreading news is credible.
Wow, such an excellent advice, Professor Chris. So before we end this short interview with you, Professor, so what message would you like to leave for young voters, especially that we have an upcoming election next year in the Philippines?
I want the young voters to remember that voting is both a right and a responsibility. It is your opportunity to shape policies and leaders who will determine the future of our country. Be informed, be critical, and most importantly, participate. Exercise your freedom to vote, the freedom to choose the right leaders who will lead and who will guide us to a better society. And I want everyone to always remember that your voice matters and your vote can make all the difference.
Wow, thank you so much, Professor Chris, for those enlightening insights. So listeners, you've heard it from Professor Chris. Your vote is a powerful tool for change. So start preparing now by researching candidates, engaging in meaningful discussions, and staying informed. Remember, as what Professor Chris mentioned, the future of our country lies in your hands, and every informed choices contributes to building a stronger democracy. That's it for today's episode of Boto Ko, Boto Mo, Your Choice Matters. Thank you for tuning in, and a special thanks to our guest, Professor Christopher C. Reblenka, for sharing his wisdom. So if you wanted to listen to his lectures, you may visit Northwestern Mindanao State College of Science and Technology. Join us next Saturday at 7 p.m. for another inspiring discussion on voter education. Until then, stay informed, stay engaged, and let your voice be heard.